Oh, guys, good, you hear? I am so excited. Guess what? I hope this isn't about your podcast again. Why, did you finally listen to it?
Da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da. The Gloomy Next Door production. You're listening to BYOTP Radio. Coming up next, the Gloomy Next Door. The Gloomy Next Door podcast.
Dun 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 dun.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm everybody's friend.
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled and informative episode of The Groomer Next Door. I'm your host, Chris Green, and joining us in just a few moments is my good friend, Troy Allison. Troy actually has a great company called Fetching Foods out of Las Vegas, Nevada. And I just absolutely had the most fun being able to have him on and be able to talk to him. Just an amazing guy. Has so much background and just a lot of great stories. Before that, let's go into the fact of the week. Condemned grains, also known as moldy grains, which are wheat, corn, etc., are not fit for human consumption, yet can be found in your dog's kibble. They contain harmful mycotoxins that end up in pet food. Is it any wonder why so many dogs are now allergic to grains? Which has pretty much been my biggest gripe this entire time, is just the inferior product that's in kibble. Oh, let's put science stuff in it. It's science. Let me tell you, that doesn't mean anything. That is one of the reasons why so many dogs are suffering from unfortunate side effects of cancer. And so many are going through so many different things, and not just dogs, but cats as well. Biggest gripe. Oh my gosh, it is just all the time with me. I do want to actually, throw a little bit more out there. This week has been absolutely chaotic. We had somebody come through the shop. They had found a little kitten. It had been attacked by a couple dogs, probably the same way as you would think of a cat playing with a mouse. They asked, hey, we can't keep the cat. Is there any way that you can take him in? Well, of course, as we do, we said, of course. We luckily had some flea treatment still from a previous foster, so we were able to treat our kitty. And, he was adopted pretty quick. One thing that's great about having the shop is the fact that we know so many different people, and we have a very, very lovely clientele that they're just amazing people. So we were able to find a home for him right away. But then again, here we go again. It is currently Saturday. And it's kind of early in the evening. And we get a phone call about 4 abandoned kittens. And of course, as we do, we rush out and pick up these adorable kittens, which you had seen on Facebook. And of course, we'll keep updating. As of right now, we know that there's a respiratory infection, at least in each one. But that, and some conjunctivitis. And who knows what else. So on Monday, we will be vetting them at our local animal clinic. We'll take them in and they'll treat them, and we'll give you guys more updates as they come along. So, sounds like Troy is about to make his way into the podcast studio. So, with that said, welcome Troy Allison from Fetching Foods.
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
All right, folks. This week we are joined by Troy Allison. He has a new company and an amazing story. He's with Fetching Foods. Thank you very much for joining us this week.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're not actually shy to this whole process. You've paid attention to what goes on, so this is going to be interesting to actually be part of it and not listening to it as just somebody listening. So this is going to be kind of fun for you, I hope. I hope it's going to be fun for me because I already know what we're going to go on, and it's going to be a good time.
Yeah. I am completely impressed by the body of work that you put together, and all the interviews you've had over the years. It's extremely impressive. And I have to admit, I did a little listening beforehand just to gird my loins before we had our talk today.
And I thought that was kind of funny. It's always kind of weird whenever I see that, and I'm always like, God, I hope I live up to the hype of it, even though I just think of it as a fun little thing to do, and hopefully a little beacon to put out there, and hopefully people learn a little bit. So I always think it's a little weird whenever I see or hear somebody go, yeah, I listened to it before. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to get shy now. I do. It's so funny. I do actually get shy, and I kind of curl up a little bit. But yeah, it's fun. Well, I loved your origin story. And, like we always do, we always start by learning a little bit about the guest and how they got started. And, well, you have a really unique origin story, which even starts way back before the actual pet food. So let's go back to the beginning. What did you start doing? How did you get into raw feeding? What was the whole backstory of Troy Allison?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So I have always had dogs growing up, and cats too. And I grew up in a rural place in Northern California, and a small farming community north of Sacramento. And so I was always around dogs and cats, and for the most part, we fed our dogs kibble and table scraps. And then as time went on, it was all exclusively kibble. And when I had a few different jobs and went into the Army, and when I got out of the Army, I got a cat and adopted this cat from the shelter. It turns out that I was buying the cat kibble. It had a urinary blockage, and got sick right in the living room, and it was a real horrifying thing to see. It brought the dog or the cat to the vet, and the vet said, yeah, it's a urinary tract blockage, and it's from the food you're feeding it. And I didn't really realize what that meant. I was still kind of young, and I said, well, what do you mean food? And he said, yeah, some of the foods, kibble has crystals in it, and those crystals block the urinary tract. Well, the long and short of it was the cat had to be put down because we couldn't clear the urinary tract blockage, and I was stuck with this really immense pet bill. And I always remember midnight, and I feel bad that I didn't know any better at that time for feeding kibble. And then, I went on with my life and worked for a high-tech company, and got advanced degrees in engineering and business, and kind of lived that life and fed my dogs kibble. And when I was feeling like the dog food needed to change, I went into PetSmart and looked around at the aisles of food and bought breed specific kibble and brought it home and fed it to the dogs, and they liked it or they didn't, and if they didn't, I'd just go buy another brand. But it was all kibble, and I just never really gave it much thought. Then I retired from my high-tech job, and I didn't realize it at the time, but the Chihuahua I had, and it's a long story how I got Chili, but the Chili, he ended up passing away, and in retrospect, from what I know now, I probably had a hand in his death, and I didn't realize that at the time. I got a Rhodesian Ridgeback puppy after Chili passed, and I was living in downtown Portland at the time, and in downtown Portland, there are all these farm-to-table restaurants, but they also have farm-to-table pet food products. And walking around with Rosie in downtown Portland, I was exposed to these, and the breeder was feeding Rosie kibble, and that's what I continued to feed Rosie for a real short time until I came across these boutique pet food companies there in downtown Portland, and I started feeding her that food, and I noticed an immediate change in her health. And I ended up, getting her to raw food, and I saw lower poop, great vibrancy. Even as a puppy, I could tell the difference, and lots of energy. Really, just she was a different dog. Even as a puppy, moving from kibble to freeze dried. I had a short period on freeze dried food, and then ultimately over to raw. And I kept feeding her raw all the way till I moved back here to Vegas, and then I had problems with my raw supplier, so I switched out and started making my own. And I've got a culinary background, and I have a background in nutrition. I used to be a semi-pro athlete, and we had a nutritionist on the team, and that's where I started learning about nutrition. And I did it as, put my energy to researching nutrition and understanding human physiology and how food affects the body and performance and that kind of thing. And so when I started looking at it for dogs, I realized that, hey, humans and dogs are really close, and that I had been ignoring all of the different things that make a healthy food, feeding kibble, when it was all right in front of my face. I was knowledgeable enough to know better, but feeding kibble was just so natural, and everybody was doing it. I never even gave it a thought. I thought, it's, what you feed dogs. But as I started looking at it from a nutritional standpoint, I had that aha moment, and that as part of being exposed to those raw feeders in Portland kind of clued me in, and that's where I kind of got the epiphany. And I remember the exact moment looking down, watching Rosie eat that food, and thinking, I'm on to something. This is how dogs are supposed to eat. It's been raw ever since, and I started making my own food after I moved to Vegas and I had problems with the supplier. And it was very, I wouldn't say a big step, but it was a medium step, going from having it all done for me to making it myself. I've trained in the culinary arts for years, and so I know how to make food, so I'm really good at, slicing and dicing and that kind of stuff. And then coupled with the nutrition, I just started researching and, dusted off those skills I had in college, really being able to dive into a subject and absorb a lot of information and put that chemistry and biology stuff that I hadn't used in years to work, and figured out what Rosie needed. And I noticed right away, even from the top grade commercial raw product that I was feeding her, when I switched her over to my own recipe, I guess you could call it that, was a huge improvement in her, even over and above what I already saw before. Her poops were even smaller. Her energy was better. Her attitude was better. Coat looked better. I didn't think you could get better than that grade of food that I was feeding. But then when I made my own, I used only the best ingredients, organic, plant matter, USDA, FDA approved, grade meats, so select and above. I had the protein to fat ratio just right. I was very meticulous in how I calibrated this diet, and it really paid off. I was shocked. And then
it's really funny how that works. It's funny how you can go, oh my God, that's what's in there, and then all of a sudden you really start to then want to read more. And from what I'm gathering, that's what it came down to. You took what you already knew nutrition-wise, and then you were like, wait a second, and then you start reading, and you could become almost hooked on it. And you almost become to this point of, every moment in your life reading more and finding out more, and then realizing nothing that Kibble has is in what you're feeding. So you're thinking, why is it that we're all feeding Kibble if they're not putting the right things in the food?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it became really apparent to me when I looked at Kibble critically. I just took it for granted. It was just there. But it literally, Chris, took 20 minutes of, hey, let me find out really what this stuff is. And within a very short period of time, I realized that what I was essentially feeding Rosie was a Cheeto with a multivitamin.
That's nice. That's actually not nicer than what I usually call it. I usually call it a Big Mac. It's pretty bad.
It's not even as good as a Big Mac.
True.
That's why they have to load it with all those nutrients, providing too many nutrients for the body to actually absorb. So, a lot of it, even though it's balanced, because there's really just the Kibble in and of itself has almost virtually no nutritional value. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly not good for their dental hygiene or their dental health. I thought, oh, well, it's got to be good for that because, crunching.
Right.
But it's really like eating Doritos, using Doritos to brush your teeth. Mm-hmm. It doesn't do a very good job.
There's high amount of sugar in there. There's nothing that's good. And it's, that's part of it is that you do hear a lot of times, well, it's crunchy, so it has to be actually cleaning. No, it's not. Or you even look at some of these dental chews and they're high in wheat. And it's like, but there we go with that product. That's actually contributing to the same problems. If it's wheat, corn, soy, gluten, any of these things that are supposed to not be in there, and you're saying, oh, but it's a dental chew, so it's got to be good. It's not. It's just Kibble again.
Oh, it's got to be good because it's green.
It's green. I like it.
Right? It is. They're green. Yeah, and then you think when they're eating that, you're like, well, where does that go?
Yeah.
And why is it green? Well, what did they do to make it green? What chemical is in there?
What dye? Yeah.
Exactly. It's not healthy. You don't eat dye in your normal everyday diet.
Well, you're not supposed to. It depends if you're having cupcakes. Right. Cupcakes have dye, and I unfortunately ingest a couple of those every so often, but that's not in every meal.
Yeah, sprinkles on the donut.
Oh, yes, there's that too.
Yeah. Which I don't eat many of.
Oh, well, I do. I'm sadly enough, I do.
I was having this conversation today about vitamins and iron, and because my fiance, she has a low iron count, and so I made spinach and beets last night. She's not a big fan of beets, and anyway, she was saying how much energy she had today, and she's feeling good, and she doesn't like taking an iron supplement, and we were talking about how the body processes a manufactured iron versus eating iron in a whole food, and how much easier it is on the body and the different kind of side effects that come from eating a manufactured supplement. And that's really what is in Kibble, is manufactured supplements. It's not coming from a whole food. And it's so much more difficult for the body to digest and process. And I don't think people appreciate that all those strains that you put on your body accumulate and wear it down over time. That's why I believe, and what I've been reading in research papers, is that that's one of the big suspects behind the extremely high cancer rate in dogs is kibble is a low-grade poison that eventually wears down the immune system, and it's one of those things where it strains and strains and strains, and then it breaks. And that's when you start getting these terminal illnesses break through, when the immune system finally can't handle it anymore.
Look, you know what? When you look at the dog's anatomy, and you actually see how it takes in all of its food, it breaks it down in such a unique way that it takes every little aspect of it, and then what it doesn't need, it sends out. But it takes in a great deal. With kibble, there's nothing to take in. That's why people always say, my dog's poop smells bad. My dog goes to the bathroom all the time. It's poop, poop, poop all the time. And they don't understand why. It's like, okay, well, let's go back to the wild. Let's take a little bit of a trip backwards. Let's look at the dog in the wild, and let's see what they would eat. Let's just say that they hunted a rabbit. They would take down, the body broke it down in so many ways, took down the stomach where the vegetation was there, all the minerals, all the vitamins, every bit of the protein, it took it, it stored it, and then whatever it didn't need, it expelled it. And I look at that, and I again, it's the data that's been collected, that's out there. And we all have phones, which ultimately we're able to search all this stuff online and read it, which is amazing. And you start to read all these things, and I know you've done the same thing. You see how it breaks it down, and then you look at what's in kibble. A bunch of words that nobody really understands. You need to be a veterinarian to really understand them, or a doctor of some sort. For most of us, we don't understand. Yeah, a chemist. That too. Yes. I mean, it's science. You know, I don't trust the FDA for 1 second. My food, luckily, I don't. The FDA mostly works with food, drug, and kibble. USDA, at least they handle human grade food, so at least we're a little bit better off. Not much, but we're still better off. And so, that's where first thing I noticed with you is you made a point. It's human grade. And that's the first thing that caught my attention was human grade. Okay, well, you understand this then. You understand the fact that you've cut the FDA out, which again, very public about my distrust in them. And you've seen it from the big side. Plus, you've seen this from the actual pet parent side, where you realized, hey, you know what? I drank the Kool-Aid. I fed what these guys have been selling me for the entire time. I'm in the same boat. I saw it for my entire life. This is appropriate. We have in a bag these little kibble-sized little things that contain everything your dog or cat needs. And you don't have to go anywhere, and we will be able to sell it to you at such a low cost. You'll be able to take care of your dog or cat, and they will live forever because we have the minerals, we have the protein, we have everything scientifically manufactured for your pets. And look at the pretty bags that they come in. It's eye-pleasing. Yeah. And it's all a lie.
It's all a hoax.
Yes, it's a big lie.
And, you've made a few points here. I'll see if I can remember them. The first one you were talking about is, why do dogs poop so much? Or cats, even. And it has to do with digestibility.
Yep.
When you eat, like you mentioned, in the wild, you're playing to how the dog has evolved and the cat has evolved over thousands, tens of thousands of years to be able to eat this prey and have the highest digestibility factor. So the food that they eat, it has a high bioavailability. That means that when they eat it, a lot of it's absorbed. And when you eat raw, the bioavailability is usually in the upper 80s to low to mid 90s. The digestibility is 80s, high 80s to low to mid 90s percent. So if you ate 1 pound of food, 90% thereabouts would be absorbed by the body, and 10% would be excreted. When you eat kibble, it can be as low as 40% digestibility. So if you fed your dog a pound of food, a pound of kibble, it would poop out half a pound, because the stuff that is needed to make kibble, the fillers, the grains, all the stuff that makes them feel full, because basically they're eating a Cheeto with a bunch of items in it, and so all that, the stuff that they can't digest is pooped out.
Right.
That's what makes it cheap. And dogs and cats are made to eat raw food. The enzymes help. We were talking about dental hygiene. Help clean their mouths. It keeps their teeth in good shape. And if you've ever talked to a dentist or even a medical professional, they'll tell you if you have bad oral hygiene and bad oral problems, it spreads toxins throughout the body, and it can be fatal. It can stunt growth. It can do all kinds of things, especially in children. It's really bad to have poor dental hygiene. So in dogs, it's the same way. So you got to take care of, raw takes care of the mouth, it takes care of the digestive tract, takes care of skin issues. When I first started making fresh foods, my friends asked, they said, hey, it's interesting you're doing this. You mind if I try some? And so I gave it to them. And the first one was a dog that had chronic itching, always itched all the time. And I didn't really think much of it, but they said, wow, it was amazing. I fed, Fido, your recipe, the food that you made, and the itching went away. This is just barely even scratch. I've had this dog for 3 years, and it's always itched, and now it's not. And so, guess who was my first customer? And then a cat had diabetes. You got him on fetching foods. And, cats are a whole other animal. Haha, joke. But, they're tough to get, to transition over. But this cat had diabetes and fed him, just got him off kibble, got him on to fetching foods, the cat meals, and, diabetes remission. Had to give daily insulin shots in this cat and didn't have to do it anymore. So, it's not a cure-all, but there is a lot of evidence and science that says a good diet is healthy for you. And you have to eat the right diet. It's not just eating foods and having a bunch of minerals and vitamins in the product you're eating. You have to eat the food in the right form, the way your biology has been designed to consume it. And can you imagine eating Soylent Green, if you remember, if you know that reference, eating a cube of something and having it satisfy all of your nutritional needs?
No.
That's kind of what the panacea of kibble is.
And it's funny because, here's the next part is, biologically appropriate. You can't give a rib to a chihuahua, obviously, because they're never going to be able to chew that bone. You gotta look at it from the actual size of the dog. That's one of the big misconceptions is, well, I'm giving, or again, you'll hear I gave, again, Fido, I boiled up this bone and I gave him the bone. There's an issue right that. You're actually causing the bone to splinter, causes a lot of issues. If the dog is not able to actually properly chew it, you got so many issues. So you have to look at it from so many different levels, and yet when you really start to look at it, it is actually very common sense. But you have to do the research. And the data is there, again. Now, I wanted to go back to commercial raw feeding. Now, we don't have to mention, if you want to, that's totally fine. But in your experience, now you had the big company that pretty much gives you all of the options. And there's definitely, questions that I had because we talked about it before, and that is, what did you learn from actually feeding this commercial product, and what was some of the things that you saw that you were not happy with?
Yeah. Yeah, so I won't mention their name.
Okay.
But they're a very reputable company, and they've gotten big. They've started small and built their way up. But I think at some point, and this is something I don't want to have happen to Fetching Foods is, start focusing on the money aspect. What happened is you could tell that they were doing high-end manufacturing, and so they have a very strict diet of all the ingredients. So not a strict diet, but a strict recipe of all the ingredients. And when for the beef, for example, when it sits out or even sits in your fridge, it'll oxidize and it'll kind of get that brown look on it.
Yes.
And that's a perfectly normal process. It doesn't mean the meat is unhealthy as long as it's been kept correctly in the right temperature and handled properly. And, it has a finite shelf life, but just because it starts to turn a little brown, it's not the end of the world. It's still edible. But I think what was happening is they started to dye their beef a certain color so that it would look palatable to the human.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed it in their poop, that their poop would be red. And there weren't beets in the recipe. So there was something up. And then in the chicken, you could tell it wasn't high-grade chicken. And from the way it was processed, it wasn't whole pieces of chicken that looked like it had gone through some kind of shredder. It looked like it was already shredded and then got processed even further. And one of their claims is that they don't claim any kind of human grade product, and they're a larger company, so they can obviously get economy of scale, bulk discounts, that kind of thing. I suspected and still suspect that they're not using human grade ingredients. And that's why when I switched over to feeding Rex and Rosie my diet, they got Rosie was first, but they got an immediate improvement over what I thought was already as good as you could get. And that was even more evidence that suggested that the product I was feeding them wasn't ideal.
And see, that makes me so sad because, and again, I won't mention them either, but, their practice is so high scale. They're attached to some very big names. And, when I found out about where they source their protein from, I liked what I heard when it came to the practice. It's definitely raised my questions too, because again, they are a great product, or at least the mission statement is great, and you're paying for that too. But if it's not human grade, there is so many problems.
Well, so there's this nuance with when you say human grade. So some people say, well, it's FDA approved food. Well, that could mean that the food, the meat is in an FDA approved facility, and then once it's processed, like the carcass, is kind of left over, then that piece it was in an FDA facility, and so that means it's automatically food grade. But then once the carcass is processed and there's all that stuff left over, then they take it over and process it for dog food.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an FDA approved, level chicken, but when it's when only the remnants are remaining, then it's scrap and it's not human food at that point, and then they move it over to a dog food or pet manufacturing side of the building and make pet food.
And see, that's just dangerous.
That
It makes sense. It makes all the sense, and it becomes dangerous because then it almost becomes, well, it doesn't almost, it becomes false advertisement. And then you have...
It depends on how you slice it. So, I understand where so I used to be in marketing. I started off as an engineer, but I ended up leaving, ending my career as a marketer. So I understand how they view it and how it's kind of spun. But it's not completely honest. So I'm with you, and that's one of the reasons why I left that job, was because I'm a really honest person, and I would cringe when I'd have to spin things a certain way that I knew wasn't quite right, was misleading.
Yes, and you know what? I'm waiting for it. I know I'm going to have inquiries on who it is, and I'm pretty much going to make it clear. I'm not going to mention who they are. There's specific people who will inquire, and I know exactly who they are as we're talking about this. I'm going, oh man, I'm waiting for an email. Because they're so connected in all of this. And that's what I love about these conversations is, and I hate at the same time, is I will have these conversations with different people, and then down the road something happens, and I just go, oh man, that happened. And it's so difficult because you believe in it, and you're hopeful that everything is completely honest. It's difficult. And you said it. You said it best, and that is, once it becomes too big, you end up starting to sacrifice some things. And I've heard the same thing even at Walmart. I heard a rumor that the meat is actually colored at Walmart so that it's eye-pleasing. No, it's an alleged statement that was made. There's no confirmation, but it makes sense. It's like, oh, well, it's always so pretty red. It's got to be, there's got to be some kind of artificial to it.
Yeah,
it's difficult.
But this company still manufactures a great product when compared to Kibble.
Right. Oh, yes.
So what we're doing is we're splitting hairs.
Right.
And it's still a good product. You'd want to use this over feeding Kibble any day of the week, and you're going to get a good product, and they are consistent, and there are lots of things to say about it, and that are really positive. But it kind of goes down to are they being completely honest? There are inconsistencies with how the product looks versus what they say.
Right.
And, what you receive versus what they say. And I think that's worthy of a scrutinizing eye and maybe some skepticism in their marketing.
It's possible. I mean, I'm always optimistic that products of that caliber are going to remain at that high standard.
Yeah.
Unfortunate is that things do happen. So, I will not defend them. I'm hoping that it's just, it was just a bad situation, but you never know.
Sure. Got shareholders to please.
Oh, yeah, that's always the fun part.
Right.
Now, I wanted to get into your product because I love what you're doing. That's why we're talking. You have such a cool story. Now, before we actually go into it, I wrote this down and I wanted to know. So you had said you played sports. You had played a specific sport in college?
Huh?
I wanted to know which one it was because being a sports person as I am.
Oh, I was a semi-pro cyclist.
Oh, okay.
And the team I was on, I worked with Dr. Max Testa. So if you know him, or if you're big in cycling, you know who he is. And they had a whole team. So like guys that were at the peak of their sport would come in to be analyzed by Dr. Testa. And so, like Michael Schumacher, if you know Formula One, he was in the lab and had his physiology analyzed, and all the series of tests that he does, physical and biological tests, were all done on him. Same thing with us, and we did a lot of really cool stuff. And we had a nutritionist and a physiologist. Our bikes were fitted perfectly. I mean, we really had some top-notch stuff. It was fun, and so that's kind of where I'd gotten into nutrition. And I was talking to the nutritionist, and it was Eric Heiden, if you remember him, the speed skater. He was the one that brought in Max Tessa into the UC Davis School of Sports Medicine, and that's where our team got serviced. And so I met Eric Heiden, gold medalist, speed skater, that guy, really cool guy, and he got into cycling and loves it. And he was friends with Max, and was able to lure him in. And Max stayed there for years, long after I left. And ran the sports, big chunk of the sports medicine stuff. Eric, was an orthopedic surgeon, if I remember correctly.
It's funny. I've talked to so many people that either were semi or were pro in some sports. I think you would be my first cyclist, which is kind of weird. Yeah. I know one other person who's involved in it, but we don't really actually talk. I just know through Facebook. He had an inquiry a long time ago about something about the podcast. I gave him some information, and that was the closest that was. But yeah, you're actually the first cyclist, which is kind of weird. I thought that I've covered every sport, but that's, and you think about it and now I'm analyzing you and going, yeah, I would see where you would have to be at the peak of every aspect. Nutrition is going to be the key. There's so many moving parts that have to keep it to go the right way. Balance and your legs are everything. And boy, yeah. Sorry, now
it's a game of millimeters.
Yeah.
Just a little bit better here, a little bit better there. It all adds up, and that ends up being a slight advantage over your competition. And absolutely, nutrition is huge. And when I was working with a nutritionist, she, PhD from UC Davis, they were eating their own dog food, so to speak. They would analyze every single thing you ate, and we would do tests where they would write papers, and like one test we did is a sports drink. Is a sports drink just pure carbohydrates, electrolytes, that kind of thing? Does it provide any better performance than a sports drink that has protein in it? And they would analyze the difference. So it was like a 12-week test, and you get on the stationary bike, ride for 3 hours, and you would drink, bottle A or bottle B.
Right.
And you didn't know which one, and then they would measure your performance over the course of 12 weeks. 2 times a week you'd be on this stationary bike, that kind of thing. And so it came from a lot of data-driven, scientific background is, kind of how I picked up on nutrition. I started reading it and researching, and, I've got an engineering brain, so I was really focused on the scientific aspect. Data always gets me excited, and when I can hold on to some data, I run with it.
Oh, I'm with you on that. That's what I love about this topic. That's why as you can tell, I really do have this conversation almost weekly, because the data is there. But the story, the exposure, the full spectrum is so huge. It's like a universe of its own that you can have this conversation 1,000 times, and every one of the conversations is a new element. And that's what I love about it. That's what always gets me. And it's kind of where you're at with this, where a human, we're being tested on what we're taking in. And it was done to you, and you were watching that, and now you're actually applying almost the same kind of structure, the same kind of testing on what you're going to start feeding, and noticing the breakdown in how the dogs and cats are responding to it, which, again, there's the science. And it's such a cool concept. Sports drinks, not a huge fan. I used to always drink chocolate milk after a game. But I played hockey, and so it was a little bit harder from like your baseball, and I would always drink chocolate milk after. I loved it. I thought it had things in it that actually was a lot better. But now I'm starting to hear...
Well, see, that goes with the protein as a recovery.
Yeah.
Back to that. Does protein help or accelerate recovery?
And I always thought it did. I always felt like it did. And that was just my takeaway. No, I don't know. I hear so many different things now, but yeah, and of course,
I think the study showed that it does help.
It does help. It actually helps on recovery, on actual the physicality of what it takes down on your body, and then it almost kind of rejuvenates it at the same time. So quicker actual recovery. Yeah, and
the science is how much and in what way and that kind of stuff, but yeah, you're right about the milk. Protein for recovery is a good thing.
It's key. And people used to be like, why? Why would you do that? Because I always feel better afterwards. I mean, I could have been knocked around right and left in the game. I drink my chocolate milk afterwards, and I feel better that night, or at least the next day, where other people might have been sore. Well, yeah, I don't know. As you can tell, I always go off track. You've caught that before. It's the joy of conversation. Let's go into your point.
It's your show.
Well, I like having weird conversations. That's just me. Now, you have a variety. Now, of course, cats are specific, so it's not as much variety. But we're going to start off with your typical raw, and give us kind of a synopsis on raw and what your product is, and it will go down through the list.
Sure. So raw. Cats are different than dogs, as we know. So cats get no animal protein. I use small game animals like quail and grind them up whole in the cat meals. I call them meals because when you say dog food or cat food, it conjures up this repulsive thing in your mind, and so I call it a meal because this is on a different level than dog food. You might actually want to eat this, and you actually could because it's the same stuff you're buying in the grocery store for yourself. Just no spices or salt or anything. But the cat meals are they're whole ground bird. What you can buy at the store. So they'll have the heart and the liver, some gizzards, and those are all ground up. And then I'll use turkey liver and some salmon, usually wild caught Alaskan salmon. And I tried to use sockeye salmon because there are three main parasites that end up in fish, and two of them are prevalent in freshwater fish, and one of them is in saltwater fish. And then you've got the thing with mercury and has to do with food chain. So the higher up on the food chain you are, the more smaller fish you eat, and smaller fish eat even smaller fish, and you end up absorbing mercury from each thing that you eat. It accumulates in your body. So these small fish are getting little pieces of mercury. Then the bigger fish eats them. Then they get the mercury that was accumulated in all the smaller fish, and et cetera. It goes up the food chain. So that's why tuna isn't so good. But sockeye salmon is a plankton feeder, and they don't eat smaller fish. So they have a lot less mercury. And then by going with sockeye with salmon, they're ocean caught, so you don't have to worry about one of the parasites. And then this is the one thing that is is kind of cooked because it's canned, and there's a process involved. And I mostly use the salmon for a little bit of protein, but mostly the omegas, where the omega-3 and omega-6, and that's where the bulk of the omegas come from. And that's kind of the cap product. So it's salmon, a poultry, a small game bird, and then augmenting with some other organs from like organic turkey, organic fed turkey.
Gotcha.
And then the dog meals, it's approximately an 80 to 82 percent animal protein to the rest pretty much plant matter, or honey, plant matter plus honey and eggs. I use a locally grown honey, a raw honey in my meals, and that's really good for allergy resistance. Some of the local benefits, usually when bees pollinate, and you eat that honey, it's really good because it gets you helps your allergic reaction from where the pollen is gathered. So you kind of build up an immunity from it. So if you my local honey is going to be a little bit useful, but not as potent as it would be as if you were here than if you were consuming the food in Missouri, for example.
Gotcha.
It's not entirely all the local pollens. But it's about 10% offal, and then the rest is flesh meats. And I recently, my little grinder that couldn't anymore, so I got a bigger commercial grade grinder, and it makes short work of everything. You can grinds up the bones, and I use duck egg in my dog meals. Pasture raised organic duck eggs. I get them from Whole Foods. So this is the thing that what a lot of people don't get is I actually buy my products from the same place you buy your products to eat. So I go into the grocery store, I go into Whole Foods, Sprouts, to Costco. I even have a local distributor that supplies a lot of the big resorts down on the strip, and that's where I get my food. So it's the same food you're eating when you're here in Vegas, and that makes a quality difference. It's not a carcass, and we're not stripping the stuff off the bones that you couldn't take off for the boneless, skinless chicken breast that you're buying in the store.
Right.
It's not the scraps from that, and it's it's a fact that the higher quality of food that you use, the greater the bioavailability, which means the higher the digestibility factor is. It's a healthy improvement. So it's like the difference between eating some really subprime meat versus eating a prime steak.
Oh yeah, you're going to see the difference immediately.
Yeah,
texture alone is going to be there, but yeah.
Texture, but you talked about smell of feces smell.
Yeah.
Horrible. And Rex and Rosie, I think I talk too much about poop because it's got
I do too.
It's a big indicator for health, and I pick it up every day. But when I was feeding them that other raw food, they pooped about twice as much as they do now. I usually don't pick up poop on Saturday and Sunday, and so Monday is my big poop day. I go out and clean up the backyard. I take the weekend off, but I clean up the backyard on Monday, and it's literally, so I have 170, 180 pounds worth of dogs, and I could fit all the poop over the weekend into my 2 cupped hands. It's not a lot.
That is not a lot at all.
No, it's not. And you think if you feed your dog kibble, how much that's going to be?
Your whole backyard, pretty much.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You have to pick up every day. Actually, my neighbors, we have a 2-story, and so I can look out my bedroom window. I don't spy on them, but glance out, and you can see they have 3 dogs, medium-sized dogs, and they pick up every other day, and they have to because their yard is covered.
Yeah,
completely covered. You talk about landmines. That place is landmines. You couldn't walk across there without stepping in it.
And that's how you always do. And I'm the same way. I talk about poop way too much. You'd almost think that I didn't mature in that area too, because I like the word poop, and I like to talk about it a lot. It's really the go-to conversation starter when it comes to, well, let's talk about your dog. And again, I get that question. My dog has a lot of allergies. Well, it always starts with, what are you feeding your dog? And that's a daily conversation. But, it really is always, how is your dog's bowel? Are they pooping enough? Is it a lot? Is it a little? And I love when people say, well, it's not that much. It's, a few times a day and it smells. Well, then it's probably a lot. And it's a conversation that happens a lot, so I know. Next topic.
I'm a poop expert.
Poop expert.
Yes, I am. I'm a poop expert. I was just going to say, on the raw food, is I buy it all fresh. So when you order, I make it. So I take my last order for the week on Wednesday. There's some wiggle room. I'm not too strict about it. But on Thursday, I usually go out and shop. Friday and Saturday, I make the meals, and Monday I deliver and ship. So delivery is local. I do free delivery local, and then and for the people who aren't local, I toss it in insulated box with and ship it off.
I was gonna save that one to the last of the whole conversation. I was gonna point that out because remember we talked about it the other day, and I was like, I wrote down, okay, put that in. But hey, good times. That's the best part of that conversation.
Well, the point I want to make is that I make it fresh. So right. I'm not sitting on. I don't have 6 refrigerators or freezers that are filled with food that I've already made, and they're I'm just waiting to defrost it and package it. Because we package it in whatever size meals for your dog. So we want to make it really convenient, because the 3 pillars that we stand on are quality, customer service, and integrity. And part of the customer service aspect is, if you have a small dog and you feed 3 ounces in one feeding, then and you want it, we'll make 3 ounce packages for you, so that you just whip it out and dump it in the bowl.
Which is what brought me back to the whole thing of, what did you learn when you actually were feeding the commercial raw feeding? And that's where I was like, okay, I picked that one up, but I'm glad that you actually brought it into a full front, and you were really adamant about, this is really what I've learned is I want to make sure it is fresh. So that's how I took it when we were talking about it earlier is, look, I realized it wasn't fresh, and that's so important to be able to pick that up. That was a huge thing, and that's one of the things that we talked about the other day is just the fact that it wasn't, and it catches me because, again, you're trying to actually provide people with something that's very difficult, and I'm gonna not even sugarcoat it. It isn't difficult. It isn't easy to do any of this stuff. It's not easy to raw feed. It's not easy to get the proper things. It's not easy to get it all ready. It takes a lot of work, and a lot of people are so used to the convenience of Kibble that it's a portable and go. And people don't have the time to separate, to break things down, to even do the shopping. The shopping is crazy. For example.
Yeah. And so it's funny you bring that up. Is I participate in these raw feeding forums, and someone new will come on and they'll say, I'm first time raw feeder. I've decided I want to do it. What should I feed my dog to start off with? And then boom, they're flooded, and there's 87 responses, and some of them are conflicting and or different, and I just look at that and think, how is that person ever going to figure out what to do? So here's what I did, Chris. I just decided that I was going to start a blog. On my website, I have a blog. I wrote out, the 5 steps to raw feeding and spelled it out. I'm a little verbose, and I'm going to refine the document, but it's really simple. Here's, decide a few things. You're talking about what you've learned from raw feeding, is cost and convenience. So, what are the proteins, and what are the pros and cons of some of the proteins? What are probably available to you? What's the plant matter you ought to think about? How do you, should you add honey? Should you add eggs? But I kept it really simple so that at least what you could do is get started without having to ask a question online and being flooded by a million people that are experts because they took the question and they put it into Google and now they know the answer. They don't know what any of the underlying science is, but they provided you an answer.
Yes.
And if it's not in the first 3 Google results, they don't know what that information is. Research now constitutes going to Google and typing something in.
Very true.
To me, research is very different than that.
Yeah, it's read, and then for me, I'll speak it from my perspective. It's read an article, read a journal of something that has to do with the topics, but predominantly it's always raw feeding. And then I want to actually source that and look it up and make sure that I'm actually getting the right information. Now, the reason why I have people on the podcast is I want to make sure that my material is sourced by the right people. I want to hear experts talking about it, people who have dedicated themselves to this particular topic and have this conversation with them instead of just going, well, on Google, I was able to notice. I don't want to do that.
Well, it's a disservice. When I was trying to figure out how people came up with the rule of thumb of 30 calories per pound of dog per day is kind of what you need to feed your dog. I'm truncating the whole thing, but so I wanted to know, well, why 30 calories? And so I started, going back to Google research, and most people probably don't realize it, but Google has a research search, so it goes into research only search stuff, and trying to figure out why 30 calories. And I've gotten really close to figuring out why. I think I know why, but I haven't found the exact study that came out and said 30 calories. But what you see when you just do a regular Google search is a lot of people will cite that 30 calories, but it's been research papers that have referenced that, and that number has gotten kind of lost somewhere, the original source, and then people write articles about research papers, and then those articles, people write other articles. And so what happens is you're so far removed from the original source of why you came up with that number that it's impossible to tell. And you're just left with this question. But you find out so much more information by going back to them, trying to suss out the origin of that number. You understand so much more around how that number was generated and what it affects and different biological and physiological aspects to how people got to that number, even though I haven't been able to find the exact research paper where it was originally cited. That to me is research. And you see people citing these papers that have been referenced 3 or 4 or 5 times and abstracted away, and you've lost a lot of the scientific measurement processes. They create these papers for lay folks and even casual readers, not even people interested in nutrition, non-professionals interested in nutrition. Something on, in a magazine article in Vanity Fair. They're not scientists, but you read something about raw in a popular publication, and it's so neutered of the technical data. It's almost useless. But it gives you an answer if you Google it. It says raw is good.
Now, we are having a little bit of technical difficulties on your end with your mic, so I want to let you know, just get you a little bit back in here, because we have a little bit of kind of things going on your end, so I just want to let you know.
Oh, well, am I okay now?
You're better now, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of the tricky side on doing this. Sometimes just a little bit of movement kind of will shift and distort every little aspect. So I just wanted to get you back before we lose you too much.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go on to doggy water, because I thought that was really cool, and I wanted to actually go into that a little bit.
Oh yeah, so doggy water. So it's essentially a broth. I use the superfoods, plant matter in the doggy water, along with a novel protein like an elk or a venison, or maybe even something more exotic like kangaroo. At my local butcher shop, the good one carries it, and that's where I get a lot of my stuff from, meats. And I put it, and I cook it for like 8 hours, 9 hours, until it's reduced. And, also depends on how much, how the size of the pot, how much I'm making. But then I, put it in containers, freeze it, and I use it, and people use it as a replenishment drink. So it's sort of like an energy drink, if you will, for dogs. But here in the desert, it's especially important, and during the summer, is to make sure dogs are well hydrated.
Right.
It has a lot of good vitamins and nutrients in it, a little protein, and when you add it to the water, they drink more water than what they normally would. You can also use it as a treat. You put it in ice cube trays and freeze it, and then you can give your dog, ice cube treats. It's like a popsicle.
Right.
And my dogs go absolutely crazy for it, and other people use it as well. It's a way to, like, before you go out for a big hike, like especially here in the desert, you want to make sure your dogs are well hydrated, and that's one good way. Add some doggy water to their water. They'll drink before we go out hiking, and I know they're well hydrated for the hike.
And you're big on hiking, so you've actually had a lot of experience in this, and that's what's kind of cool about it. I was like, oh wow! I put them all together before we started, and you told me about hiking, and I was like, oh, this all makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah. Hiking and mountain biking. I actually take the dogs out mountain biking, and they're Rhodesian Ridgebacks, so they're athletes, and we can easily do a 5, 7, 8 mile ride, and they feel pretty good afterwards. So being hydrated is really important for them, because you can only carry so much water.
Right.
I have a lot in the truck, and but between where you start and when you get back to the truck, you got to make sure everything is right. No one's going to get stranded out in the desert and have some kind of dehydration situation.
And you always have to prepare for the worst. So
I do. Yeah.
And there's so much that can break, the actual body will break down and take it and store it. So you're seeing it from a multitude of advantages, not just, oh, it's just liquid, it's going to keep them hydrated. No, there's a lot of things that will break down that they're actually going to use. And that's what makes it so important. That's what makes it so unique. That's why I was like, ooh,
Yeah.
cool. Now,
it is a neat product.
I think so.
Yeah.
Now we're going to go into the next one, which, we all know that I'm not a huge fan of vegan, but, and I told you the same thing, I understand that it is a requirement to some people. Some people really want to go into this. And for that reason, you said, hey, you know what? I understand. It's still better than Kibble, and I'm here to provide you with that. And so that was where I was like, hey, you know what? I think it's cool that you do it. I'm always open to have conversations with people who are feeding vegan. And I say conversations, not lectures, not anything more, but I like the fact that you do it. So, and I like what you actually do in your vegan meals. So let's go over your vegan meals because they are really, really extensive and unique.
Okay. So, when you say vegan and dog, I actually get a lot of pushback on this because, dogs are carnivores and it's just oil and water. Vegan and dog do not go together, and some people have an actual angry reaction.
Yeah.
I had somebody just recently tell me that they wouldn't buy anything I make because I make vegan food.
Okay, that's extreme.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
I had that last week, and today I got yet another vegan customer, and I delivered meals to her two pit bulls today. But so vegan. Here's how it started. I have some friends that are vegan, and one of them has a dog, and she said, it'd be really great if this whole meat thing completely grosses me out. I know Kibble's bad. How do I I want to get them off Kibble, but I can't do the raw meat thing because I gave her a sample of the raw meat, and she opened it up and she said, "Oh my God, that's just disgusting." And I said, "What? My food isn't disgusting." And she said, "No, just the smell. It was in my house for like 2 hours. I couldn't stop smelling all the meat in my house. It was repulsive." And I said, "Okay, well, so let me see what I can figure out for you." So I started looking at it, and it's a problem that's solvable. So there are vegans out there, and they just can't stand the thought of raw meat. Though they will feed Kibble, and as you said, feeding something fresh and whole and wholesome is way better than feeding Kibble. So looking at the problem, I was able to figure out how to do a complete amino acid profile, so providing a complete protein through plants, and I still use my same vegetable mix, and so using beans and lentils, I'm able to create a complete amino acid profile, so a complete protein for dogs. I source for the omegas. I source argan oil from Turkey, which is one of the few areas over there in the Middle East where it grows. They ship it over to me. That goes in the meals. And spirulina, which is a blue-green algae. It has the highest protein density of any plant or animal on the planet. It's upwards of 70%. So it's almost 70% protein, and it's chock full of nutrients. It's an amazing thing. And I get the very best. I buy it from Japan, and I get it sent over because they have the highest rated spirulina. I don't know what they do to make it so special, but they've got good spirulina in Japan, and we use that to help create the complete protein profile. Spirulina is actually a complete protein for dogs, amino acid profile for dogs also. and it turns out to be a good product. I've used it on my dogs. Everything at Fetching Foods, every batch of food that goes out, I test on Rex and Rosie, and they're happy to be the food testers. By the way, no complaints, and I've had customers that have been on it for 3 or 4 months, and I've read different reports that say, if you do 1 month of all vegan for your dog, you should switch out and do a week of meat, or a week of meat-based foods. But the one customer I've had from the very beginning, she's been feeding her dog solid vegan for going on 4 months now, and no problems at all. She's brought her pup to the vet, and he's doing just fine. Gets all green lights. No problems found. So it is viable. It's probably not the first choice for most dog owners, but what's the alternative? That was your question or your point, Chris. What do you let them do? Do you let them slowly let their dog waste away with Kibble, or do you switch them over to something that is going to be a lot more healthy for them?
Yeah, and it's a challenge. I mean, again, I'm not going to be like some of the people that are in another sense harassing, because you've actually said, hey, look, I'm willing to go out there and do this for them. I commend you for that. And I told you that before we even recorded in our previous conversation is I commend you for at least making the product and taking the time to actually look at everything and to analyze it and to come up with a complete meal. So for that, that's commendable. And I respect that more than I can say. I've always said, there is definitely a conversation to be had. And, I've had it with different vegan pet parents, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't go a lot of directions that I'd like them to go, but at least they're not on Kibble. And that's, why feed the chemicals? I'd rather you be happy with what you're feeding your dog instead of feeding your dog back garbage. So, you're doing right, and I don't think that anybody should criticize you for having a vegan meal. I remember when we had our first conversation, I think you were kind of waiting for me to come down on you for it, and I could tell. I could actually tell you were like, oh boy, he's going to come down on me. No. I'd like to have this conversation. We had a great conversation about it the other day, and it's like, hey, you put a lot of time and effort into this. And for somebody that I'd never buy your product, you know what, you probably would never stop feeding Kibble anyway. So, people. Some people have a really bad allergic reaction to the whole vegan thing. And, there's kind of 3 people. There's those folks. There are people that are ambivalent. They're not feeding vegan, so they don't care. And then there are the people that really want vegan. It's a small percentage, but the people that do feed vegan they're really happy with it. Right.
And I'm glad, because I'm in this. I was delivering the food today, and I was thinking, if I was somehow able to, if I would do this and not be paid, it makes me happy delivering food and making the dogs and the pet guardians happy, and making a difference in their lives, even though it's not direct, it's an indirect thing by helping them eat healthier, that, somehow I could manage to live without being paid. I would absolutely do this. And so this is a labor of love. And when a customer comes to me and says, I've got a unique problem, I'm willing to take up the challenge and see if I can figure out an answer for them.
Well, another thing that I was going to save for a little bit later, but I always look at the clock and go, gosh, time goes by quickly. One of the things that I loved about your plan is that you're not going to take on a very large scale. You have an actual cutoff where you're like, okay, if I have, and I forget the exact number, but you said that there was a cap that you were going to, say, if I have this many subscribers, I will stop here just so that I can make sure the quality is there and everything is going to remain at this standpoint without letting it suffer. And I forgot exactly what the number was, so that's why I was like, well, I'll leave that one to you to tell me that.
Yeah, it's a capacity. I figure that I can be personally involved with somewhere a little north of 500 pounds a week of food. It sounds like a lot, but it's really not that much.
It's not.
And so, if I get a whole bunch of people that have small dogs, well, I'll have a lot of customers. If I get customers that have big dogs, I'll have a lot fewer because they eat more a week. But the whole idea around that is I want to be able to ensure the quality. So when I was talking earlier about on Thursday I do the shopping, I actually go out and I pick up the fruit or vegetable or look in the case and select the meat. And I handle it. So I actually handle it at 3 points in the whole process. Is, I shop for it, I buy it, I make sure that it would be something I would cook for, because sometimes I do when the stuff's out in the in the ingredient fridge. If I'm short, a few carrots or something, I'll go out there and pull those. Because it's the same carrots I use in here. I just have it measured out out in the garage or in the storage fridge. So I touch it there when I prepare it. So I put it in the food processor. I examine it a second time, and then the third time is when I actually mix it and package it. So when I can't do that anymore, when I can't ensure the quality of my product, that's when I cut it off. And that's the point.
And see, it's funny because I'm again going to go back to an early question, and that was again, feeding commercial raw food. What did you learn? And see, there it is again. There's something else that I can completely take out from that. You saw what went on from the high-end raw food, and you're like, well, by that standards, they lost something in between. And I do see that a lot. One of the hardest things for all raw feeders, and again, we covered it, was the fact that you think that, okay, I have a 75-pound Akita, it shouldn't be that much food. When you're thinking 500 pounds, I'm thinking to myself, for an Akita in a week's time, she takes in quite a lot of pounds of meat as it is, plus, I have to supplement with the vegetables that I have to puree with her and everything else. In a week's time, she takes in a lot of food. So, just a big dog like that, and that's just one of my dogs, you don't really have a large scale. You want to make sure that you're handling it at the right end. Because I would think to myself, if you were going to have more than that, at some point, the repetitiveness, how are you going to be able to notice that imperfection, as you were talking about? That imperfection is definitely very commendable. So I love that. And I love the fact that you have that goal set. You're like, okay, this is where I'm going to stop it, and I want to make sure everybody is well taken care of. Again, going back.
And you know what I love about, the business right now is, we're not trying to get on a massive global scale. I don't have aspirations to be like Mars, or Procter and Gamble. What I want to do is, have an intimate group of people that want the very best for their pets, and not just in nutrition, but in how they care for them, in how they treat them and exercise them. I think, that's the ideal customer for me, is people that truly, hold their pets in high esteem, and, exercise them and feed them well. And, they have training and, they're involved in their lives, where the pet is more than just kind of sits on the couch.
Right.
And, so the whole package. And I see the nutrition part. I can supply the nutrition part for that whole, lifestyle, and mentality that someone wants to have with their pet. It's the life experience rather than, kind of a decoration or an accessory.
Right. Well, a lot of times people think that, well, if I'm going to raw feed, that's going to change everything. That means that my dog or cat will be energetic, and it's just going to, flip a switch, and you do have to do other work. I mean, it's not just feeding is just like a human. It is a major scale, but the exercise, that's huge. Discipline, which is obedience, whether it's obedience training or it's just, proper training commands that you're having with your dog. It's very key.
Manners.
It matters a lot. Yeah, it's huge.
Manners. I was saying
manners. Oh, yes, that too. That also helps too. Yes, because how many times do they like to, try to go to your plate and take food from there? I've been to places that their dogs are just like, oh, I'm just gonna eat off your plate. No, where?
Well, you can tell. I bet the kind of dog I described, you can probably tell those dogs that make it into the groomers.
Yes, by a lot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And those are my target customers, and I don't think there's a lot of people out there, but I think they'll appreciate the fact that there's limited capacity, and we're going to focus on quality, and you can't have everything.
Right.
You can't have 50,000 pounds a week capacity and have high quality.
Right. In our last moments, and I'm surprised, I looked down at the clock and going, I can't believe this. Because we only give us so long in every kind of episode to actually publish, which is kind of weird. So we only have so much time, so that's why I always kind of look at everything. My one question I did not ask early on is your pet peeve. What is your soapbox moment? It's pet peeve, soapbox moment. What is the thing that gets you where you're just, like for mine, I go into a big box store, I see people that are in the Kibble section, and I want to have a conversation with them and try to, sway them to go to the meat department and start going there instead of buying the bag of Old Roy. Do you have that kind of moment where you're just like, I'm going to go on my soapbox and, for whatever reason?
Well, like I said, I'm really into this because I believe in the welfare of dogs and cats and all animals. And what I think kind of triggers a feeling or an emotion is when I talk to somebody and maybe they're not all the way on board with raw, or maybe haven't even heard about raw, and you tell them about all the benefits and they nod their head and they're like, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. And then, they're like, yeah, I understand it. This is the way to, have a healthy, happy pet. And then they walk away and they don't ever change anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's almost like, knowing that you're hurting your pet, even though in just a few sentences before, when you're having the conversation, their pet is the most important thing in their life, and they would do anything. They treat them like a child. They're my family. They're my children. And then they recognize how they're hurting their pet through feeding, but they're okay with that. They continue to do it.
Yeah.
And to me, it and I hate to be judgy, but that's what this is going to come off as. But I think it's calling it what it really is, and that's hypocritical. That you are okay. You're okay using all those nice and lovely terms to describe how you feel about your pet, but when the truth comes to it, you really don't care that much.
Yeah, because they want to engage the conversation, but once you get into that moment and you're explaining that, they almost check out. I get it quite often. They check out, and you can see it in their eyes. They're completely gone, and it's like,
No, I'm talking about the people that it registers.
Well, even the ones that register, those are, yeah.
Yeah, it registers, and they're getting it, and then they don't do anything to change. So you've kind of gotten them awake, and they're satisfied. They're like, okay, well, that sounds bad, but I'm used to paying virtually nothing for Kibble. And even if you say, well, you can do it yourself. It's not that hard. I'll help you. I'll give you free nutritional consulting, which I do quite frequently, and I don't mind at all because my mission is get people off Kibble. But they don't change. They're like, nah, it's okay. I'm cool.
Yeah. That I'm cool. Yeah, and everybody is they're driven to the dollars and cents because again, you can get a big 50-pound bag for crap. That too. Yeah. The convenience and the price. But again, what you're saving on vet bills alone and the hardship that you're literally poisoning your dog and cat. What's a little bit of a charge upwards? It's not that bad.
It's not that expensive. And, I could see if you had 3 Great Danes in your house. That's pretty pricey. But, you have a couple, small dogs, 10 pounds, around 10 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
You can easily feed that. It's almost your Starbucks.
Yeah.
If you took your weekly Starbucks bill, it would almost pay for that.
Right.
With fetching foods.
Especially people that go every day.
Yeah. And, there are other raw solutions that aren't as expensive, and you can grab those. Right.
Well, let us know how somebody can actually order.
You go to www.fetchingfoods.com, and there's a button that says shop. You can click that, and it has all our products listed. We hope that you place your order by Wednesday, so that we can ship it out to you on the following Monday. We are going to start a contest, that's going to give away 3 20-pound, prizes of, dog meals, that'll be complete in, December, like December 13th, I believe. And it starts this Wednesday. So enter to win, and maybe you can get a good sample.
There you go.
20 pounds will go a long way.
And of course, in the description page is so much information that is pertaining to fetching foods. I always put that in there. I always mention it, but then I always have to say it just because you never know if somebody's going to read. Because of course we're listening to an audio podcast.
Right.
Is there anything that we actually missed before we actually have to say goodbye?
Well, I don't know. You tell me, Chris. I did have this one question. Is when I bathe Rex.
Yes.
About 2 days afterwards, he starts his skin is flaky, and I've gone through all kinds of different shampoos, medicated shampoos, holistic shampoos, the whole thing, and I've almost come to the decision that I'm going to start making my own shampoo. So I thought, since I have an expert on the phone, maybe you would, is there a good shampoo? Or, every shampoo I get, it's got, just the same as dog food. It's got, 500 ingredients in it, and half of them you have no idea what they are.
Very, very good question. And I would ask, have you done a hypoallergenic, which is like a baby shampoo? Have you washed them with that?
I have like Johnson's No Tears kind of thing.
What I would do is I would put it in a actual dispensable bottle, fill it with water to almost the top, and then with about maybe 2 ounces of hypo, put that in there, shake it up, and just make sure rinse, and rinse some more, just to make sure everything comes off. But that would be my number one. Second would be I would take an empty Dawn bottle. And I would fill it almost to the top and then pour straight Dawn into it. Again, about 2 ounces worth. shake it up so it's a nice blue, and I would use that on my dog. I use a degreaser always first, and a hypo on the on face. No Dawn on face ever. Hypoallergenic, being that it's a baby shampoo, it's tearless. It will not irritate the eyes. Take the actual dry cloth, wipe around the eyes so any debris doesn't get into the eyes. And of course, always rinse. But it sounds to me like it's probably an allergy to any of the shampoos. There are a lot of dogs that have allergies to it, so I would always suggest a hypoallergenic in that case. Even your oatmeal-based shampoos do tend to have some kind of allergic reactions with dogs. So we have a lot of dogs that come in with allergies, and they always say, can we do a hypo bath? And that's exactly what we'll do. Our hypo baths are very common. And then there's some dogs that it just doesn't seem to bother them. But I would definitely guess the hypoallergenic would be your way to go.
Well, all right. Yeah, because I'll give that a try. But if not, maybe on the products page there'll be some shampoo.
Perfect. Well, hey, let me know how that works out.
Work with Rex.
That would help. Well, that's this week's episode. Thank you, Troy, for being on. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun talking to you, and we'll definitely, get back together again and, catch up for sure. This is Chris Green. Oh, go ahead. Go for it.
I was just going to say thank you, Chris, so much for having me on. I enjoyed my time as well. And, I can't thank you enough for having me on.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Well, I'm Chris Green. Have a fantastic week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, gotta go in my bedtime.